Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and today we're going to be taking a look at the new retro version of Indiana Jones from the Adventures of Indiana Jones toy line by Kenner. Now this is a reissue of a classic figure back from the 1980s. Hasbro have been doing a lot of these for the Star Wars line, but this is the first time they have taken on the Raiders of the Lost Ark or the Adventures of Indiana Jones toy line. Now this toy line is incredibly hard to find here in the UK, so I've been very excited to get this figure, which is why, as you can see, I have ordered 3 of them. The original figures are so hard to find here in the UK, and you end up paying a huge amount for them, and I've wanted to sort of get a few more in my collection. You can see here this is my original version of Indy, so I thought I'd buy myself a few of the new ones. But straight away I can see there are issues with them. There are paint application problems and some packing problems, but we'll go into that as we go through the review. The first thing I want to do is check out the cards. So here we have Indiana Jones on card, and I'm going to say straight away that these are better than the Star Wars retro collection cards, because immediately they don't have the big sticker on the front of them, so that is a massive bonus. They also don't have the faux aging all around the edge. This does actually look fairly similar to the original card that this figure came on. There's a few little extra details at the top. The 4+ has changed, and there is a choking hazard warning in the top right hand corner, but these are legal requirements that you have to have on cards these days. The card stock though is really cheap. Again, this is exactly the same as the Star Wars cardbacks. Very cheap. It doesn't feel much like card, it's just like thick paper, and the quality of the print on this, I'm going to say, is fairly poor. There's a lot of marks and extra sort of bits of dirt and stuff on this card. In fact, all of the cards I've bought, you can see there are marks on them and sort of little flecks of stuff. It just seems sort of quite cheaply made. You can see the figure here is packed on the front. We've got the legal instructions under his feet. Again, that's a requirement. It's a shame they have to do that, but you know, it is sort of part of the illegal way these are done. And you can see the figure is packed with his little pistol there, and the whip is packed behind him. Although on one of my figures, if I bring that one in, you can see the whip has somehow sort of escaped and is packed to one side. Again, that's a bit of a packing error. If we turn the card over, on the back, this is actually better than the Star Wars figures as well, because they show all of the figures that you can get in this wave. So we've got Indiana Jones, we've got Tot, we've got the German mechanic, we've got Belloc, and we've got Marion Ravenwood. They're the 5 figures that are coming in this first wave. Hopefully they will redo all of the figures in time, but for the moment we just have to make do with these 5. It's a fairly good mix of figures, I would say, just again because these figures are so hard to get, especially here in the UK. I do have originals of Tot and the German mechanic, but I have never seen Belloc and I've never seen Marion here in the UK, so those figures I would class as almost impossible to find. So this is quite a nice sort of pleasing pack to me. Again, lots of legal stuff at the bottom. This is all stuff they have to have on these cards. It does ruin the cards, but at least they've gone to the effort of showing the figures that you can get at the top there. Now it comes on to the figure, and as I say, there are already issues I can spot on these figures. I bought 3 because I wanted to have a few in my collection. I wanted 1 to keep on card and a couple to open because I might do some customizing. But there are issues. The packing issue I showed you there with the whip being loose. This one has a printing error above his eye. I can see extra paint above his eye. And this figure here has a big chip. You can see right in the middle of his chest there on the shirt. There's a big chip where the paint is missing. I'm sure there are probably other errors on these that you can't see because these are carded. But straight away this just sort of shows you the sort of quality that Hasbro kick out these days. I pointed lots of errors out on the Star Wars figures, and it seems that there are going to be more errors on these, but the only way to find out is to open them. So I'm going to pick one of these to open. It's very hard to pick which one to open because they've all got sort of fairly sort of obvious flaws. Do I pick the one with the whip that's come out? Do I pick the one with the eye error, or do I pick this one with the chip on his chest? I think to start with, I'll open the one with the chip on his chest because I can repaint that. But let's open this one, and we can then compare him to my vintage original one that I have there on the left hand side. So yeah, let's open this up. He's now released from his card. So let's first take a look at what's on this little bit of paper that's inside. And as you can see, it just says warning, choking hazard in multiple languages on that side. And on the other side, it's just general sort of copyright information. This is pretty much a repeat of, I think, what's on the back of the card. I'm not sure why they have to do it so many times. It is, because look, this is a choking hazard small sort of parts warning, which is essentially that. And then all of this copyright stuff here. So they're just duplicating things over and over again. I don't understand the reasons for that. I'm sure there is a legal reason, but it's just a waste of paper and it makes the packaging look ugly. So that's one thing that annoys me with modern figures, but I'm sure it's probably some legal reason why they have to do it. Now let's take a look at the figure. So here we have the new Indy figure. It's all right, you know, it's not an amazing figure and there are certainly some big problems with it. But, you know, it's all right. It's not the greatest of things. The little black fleck that was on his chest there actually wasn't an issue. It's something in the packing. It's come off as I've taken him out of the figure. So it did look like a paint chip. So I will apologise to Hasbro now for sort of besmirching their good name on print application and paint application. That is not actually an error, although there are other issues. There is a big chip on the inside of his thumb there where some paint hasn't been applied. That major paint fleck wasn't an issue, it was just something in the packaging. But the figure itself feels quite soft in its sculpt. It looks like it's been digitally scanned, and then yeah, a lot of the detail seems to have been lost. If we compare it to my original one here, this is the same issue that you get with the Star Wars figures. All of the sharp details are gone. On the original figure you can see really clearly the sort of buttons and the sewing detail on the front of his shirt. On this one it's almost all gone. The buttons are just sort of barely there. There's no actual detail of where the sewing is that you can see on that. It just seems to be a very soft version of the sculpt. I think that's just an error that happens when they scan these in. You can also see that his leg is really not attached to the body at all. There's quite a big gap there. I'm not sure why that is. Can I fit that in? Can I squeeze it in? No, it just seems to be a sort of moulding error. If we look at the original one, there's no gap there. So everything about this figure just feels a little bit cheap. Same as my review of the Star Wars figures, everything about it is a bit cheap. The weapon does just about fit in his hand, but you can see also that the weapon is very bent. I think if he was to try and shoot anyone with that, he would miss by quite a long way. It's certainly very off. It does have the spring-loaded arm action, which the original figures have. So if I put that arm down and let go of it, it flicks up, a sort of quick draw action. That's nice that they've gone to the effort to put that in, because it does require an extra bit of tooling. There's a little bit of a spring inside there. And it also comes with his whip, which does fit on the little sort of hook on his belt there, but this whip won't fit in his hand. The handle of it is so large, I've not been able to get that to fit in his hand. Let's just try that again, see if I can actually get him to hold it. No, it just doesn't want to stay in the hand. It's too large. The gun just about fits in, but the whip doesn't. I can see one thing they've done is they've improved his hand. They've made his hand a bit thicker. If you know anything about the original figures, the thumbs on these Indy figures always snap off. In fact, the thumb on this figure is one that I have repaired myself. So they've thickened up the thumb to make it so that it's a bit stronger, and it feels like the plastic has also got a little bit more flex to it, so it's unlikely that that thumb will break off. But it may be that is causing it not to be able to hold the whip. As we can see, this figure is not the worst one out of the packet. The face is not looking too bad. The paint application on this one is not so bad. I'd say there's a little bit of sort of runoff and bleed around, but the overall effect of it is not too bad. The general colour of this figure, I'm going to say, is a bit too warm. You can see his trousers are very sort of beige. It's a very warm beige. Indy's trousers should be this sort of duller beige colour that you see on this one. The jacket is also very dark. It's almost a black colour, but actually Indy's jacket is a sort of dark brown, and I think the original figure has that colour slightly better. It's hard to say what's wrong with these figures. They just feel very soft in their mould. You know, there's nothing is that sharp on it. I think it's all to do with how they are scanned. We've got some copyright information on the back of this, which says Hasbro SA LFL 2023 Vietnam, and then there's a number underneath it. I don't think it says all of that on the original one. No, it just says made in Hong Kong on that one. So there's a lot more copyright information on the back of it. I wonder what the number is. There's definitely a print number, but it looks like these are made in Vietnam, which is a slight change from normal. But I have to say, overall, I do like this figure just because I've been wanting to get it for a long time. So even with these flaws, with the sort of the soft sculpting, it's nice to actually have this figure. These are more interesting to me than the Star Wars figures. Star Wars figures you can really get anywhere. They're easy to find. Vintage ones are all over the shop. But these Indy figures, you just don't see them here, especially in the UK. I very rarely see these figures. The only Indy figure I've ever seen is this one, and I bought it and I paid quite a lot of money for it, even though it had a broken thumb and it's got a mark on his face. It's got a red mark on his face. I couldn't find another one that I could afford, so I bought this one, and that's the only Indy figure I have seen in a very, very long time. So even though this isn't the most amazing figure, it's sort of cheap like all of Hasbro toys at the moment, it's actually not too bad. I'm going to happily open up the sort of the other ones and get them into my collection. It's just a shame they didn't put a little bit more effort into this. It just feels cheap, like the Star Wars figures do. I actually feel that that leg may end up breaking off. It's so sort of weakly held on, and twisting it like that, I can feel something is rubbing inside, so maybe that will end up breaking off. It doesn't look like it's fitted particularly well. Also, actually, I've been twisting the head around just to see what that's like, and that head feels like it might snap off at some point. It's really stiff and awkward to move it around. It just feels like it might break. So you may see these broken at some point very soon, and something that I'll have to fix on my channel, which would be a bit of a shame. Let's take a closer look at these faces. As I showed in the sort of intro, this face in the middle, you can see there is an error above his eye. There's a sort of poor paint application. It looks like there's a line going through the eye and then a spot on his face. And it does actually look completely different to the face on this figure. Considering these, you know, all come from the same factory, it's amazing that they are so different. On this one, it looks like the eyes are sort of slanting in a bit maybe, and the eye lines are very thin, whereas this one has a much thicker sort of application to the sort of eyes, especially. It's amazing that there's so much variation coming out of what is essentially the same factory producing these. On the original figures, the gun would handily fit in this little holster on his leg, so let's try and see if that works. So this is the gun, as I showed you. It's got a bit of a bend to it, but does it actually fit in the holster? Just about. It's fairly loose. Don't think that would stay in if you were playing with it. That would fall out. If we look at the original one I have here, you can see this gun fits really snugly in the holster. I think again that's down to how these figures have been scanned. We lose a lot of definition in the actual moulding when it's scanned sort of digitally, so that fits, but I think it will fall out. And then on the other side we have a place to put the whip, so we can just roll that whip up into a little loop there, and then that should hang over that hook on the other side, which it does. That's not too bad actually. I guess there's less detail in that hook, so we can actually just hook that over. So those features do work. I think the gun will fall out though, so it's not going to be held in quite as securely as the original figure. So are these retro collection versions of Indy worth getting? I'm going to have to say yes, just because the originals are so hard to get. They aren't the greatest of quality, but having reviewed the Star Wars figures recently, I've sort of learnt to expect that the figures that you get aren't actually as good as the vintage original ones. But they are an alternative, because with Indy figures, the original ones are so hard to get. So if you want to get some Indy figures in your collection, I would suggest going out and buying these retro collection ones. Currently, these figures are on sale for $14.99. It's not certainly the cheapest of figures, and for that I would expect a far better quality figure. But that's a much cheaper way of getting this figure than trying to find a vintage original one. Certainly here in the UK, you would not find an original Indy figure for anywhere near that price. So if you want one, I would go out and grab these. I will be reviewing the rest of this wave as they turn up. I've got most of them on order. There's still a few figures that I haven't been able to track down, but as soon as they arrive, I will be reviewing them and opening them and checking them out. So please do check back on my channel for those. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.